It's time for Tastemaker Talk, the podcast for food creators who want to level up their business and make an impact in the creator economy. I'm Abbey Rodriguez.
And I'm Chandace Probst. We are your hosts and fellow food content creators here to dive deep into the trends, tools, and topics shaping the industry around us. There's so much to uncover, so let's talk about it. Tastemaker Talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode with Jack Thomas. We are so excited to be talking with them about food and value-driven content and just really the landscape that we're in right now, because food is inherently political, it's cultural, it's environmental. It has a lot of impacts, and there are a lot of those shifts happening that can essentially reshape food content. What we eat, what we see, what we search for, it isn't neutral, even if we think it is. It's shaped by systems that decide what gets visibility, what gets paid for, and what gets extracted. And I think that's a big piece right now is the extraction. Food and tech both tell us a story about what we value, but also what we're willing to ignore. So we're going to be talking about moving from an industrial food system to a digital food system and our place as creators within that. Again, both shaped by extraction, but the question we're really trying to get at in this conversation today is whether creators and communities can build something more regenerative instead, both in person from a land standpoint, but also digitally and thinking about our impact across the board. So Jack Thomas is a learning designer, regenerative farmsteader, and the founder of ACRE, which is the Agrarian Co-Learning and Resiliency Exchange. ACRE is an online co-learning and social community for liberal and leftist gardeners, homesteaders, and farmers, basically anyone who wants to have a closer relationship with their food from seed to plate. So welcome back, Jack.
Thanks so much for having me, Abby. I'm super glad to be here.
That was a fun little rhyme there. Welcome back, Jack. It's probably not the first time you've heard that before.
Maybe this week, yeah.
I've had some fun conversations with my grad school sociology colleagues. We talk a lot about these things all the time. So I think it's really important to be talking about this in the context of our businesses and what we do. And a funny little label that one of my dear colleagues has labeled, he's like the crunchy to alt left pipeline, because I always try to explain to people that they're like, so you like love the land and it's all these things and you kind of like look like a Maha person, but I'm like, no. I love the land, but in a more of like a liberal way. Like, how do you explain that? So I think it's great that you've made essentially a community to support this, especially in today's political climate. So tell us about that.
It is exactly that thing. And it's so funny that you say that, because me having to constantly explain that I am not Maha and not a trad wife is exactly why I started ACRE. A lot of folks have in the online space, been talking about the frustration that happens when you are a liberal or a leftist person and you say, I raise chickens, I grow herbs, I have dairy animals, and then you have to immediately follow up and say, but I'm not Maha, just to be clear, or just kidding. I pasteurize my milk, don't worry, so you just have to kind of go the extra step and,
I was just gonna ask you that. That was gonna be like my would you rather. I'm like, what is your hot take on raw milk? Because that's where I deviate. But we will get onto a tangent about that later, or we can do it now, Jack.
For hours we could. Let's do it later. Let's do it later. Yes. Yeah, and even amongst folks on the left, there's a wide range of opinions about raw milk and pasteurized eggs and and things like that. I feel like that could have a whole episode dedicated to it. But at the end of the day, even though I catch a lot of crap for ACRE being an explicitly liberal and leftist space, the way that I explain to people why it's so important is actually this just happened today, and I'm co-opting this like new little explanation. A gentleman on Threads, I'm like chronically online on Threads these days. A gentleman on Threads made a post that was like, everyone should be raising their own backyard chicken because you never know what the chickens that come from the store have been eating. And some of them eat worms. And if you eat a chicken that has eaten worms, you are unclean. And I was like, okay, have you actually seen what chickens eat? Like when they're free ranging and pastured in the backyard, mice and snakes and, all kinds of things. And then the guy came back and was like, well, the Bible says that chickens that eat worms are unclean. And I was like, oh, okay. You are more than welcome to believe anything that you
Yeah.
want to believe. However, as for me and myself, I watch what my chickens eat, and it does include worms because they're chickens, right? And so having a space that is explicitly liberal and leftist, where you know that when you're coming into it, you're all on the same page, like
Yeah.
not just in the same book, but you're all on the same page about the science of food, about the culture of food, about the politics of food. Because when you're all starting from a same space like that, then you can learn and grow together in a much faster, like more rapid and meaningful way. So you can feed your family and feed yourself and feed your community. And you
Yeah.
don't have to deal with fighting someone about politics or religion before you can start talking about how to solve a problem with, fusarium wilt that's,
Yeah.
attacking your garden, right?
Yeah, instead of getting it into this ideological debate, because I think like
Yeah,
that's the thing right now is that the internet is a scary place for sharing your opinions, but it's also the time of having a unique point of view and coming out to the world to say, this is what I believe, this is my ideology, and I'm here to have discourse if you want to have that respectfully, but also like if this isn't your jam, like there's the door. And
exactly.
so I think this is a good conversation to have right now because I've had a lot of just sidebar conversations with creators who our community, it's a lot of women who are traditionally uh, conditioned, I will say, to
Mhm.
keep their opinions to themselves and to not ruffle feathers, ruffle the chicken feathers. And it's like we want to have these conversations and have this point of view that we are sharing with the world, but how are we putting that into our content without, it's basically this question of how are you making yourself visible without feeling like you're going to have an anxiety attack and you have this position. So I'm curious to hear like your thoughts and advice for people who are creating food content right now from that lens.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think from two different paradigms is kind of how I want to approach this. So on the one hand, I'm a learning designer who spends a lot of time talking to food and agriculture creators that
Mhm.
want to design online courses or knowledge products, and I help them with those things. And they oftentimes in connection calls very specifically bring up, hey, this might feel a little bit political. How do I like avoid that as we're doing this design process? And I explicitly say, do not avoid it.
Yeah.
You don't want to avoid it. Even though it can require you to have kind of a thicker skin, and especially, in some of the online social media spaces, to defend your politics. People want you to defend your politics. And I know that there is this idea that people can be political, but content shouldn't be political. And even if that has ever been true, which I'm not sure that it has, now is no longer the time for that, I think. You don't
Hmm.
have to be divisive about it. I actually, at the Tastemaker conference this year, there were some really beneficial conversations, really eloquent conversations about how to signal your politics and help your community feel like a more inclusive space for the people that you want it to feel inclusive for
Yeah.
without sort of throwing a metaphorical Molotov cocktail. And I thought those conversations were really productive. And frankly, they just can't happen anywhere else in the same way that they can at the Tastemaker conference or as part of the Tastemaker ecosystem. So I really appreciated that. On the other hand, as somebody who's in the online space as a spectator, because
Yeah.
y'all, I do not have what it takes to be a content creator. I salute you. Thank you for your service. You're so brave. Um, Love to work with y'all. Could never do it myself. Um, I see people, this trend of people saying, we're over influencers who are not ready to take a stand or at least be transparent about their politics and let the chips fall where they may. That doesn't mean that you have to get out there and say, screw this person or screw that ideology, but to just say, hey, here I am. I'm going to be talking about this video of me, milking my dairy goats. And now I'm going to use my home scale pasteurizer to like pasteurize this milk before I turn it into yogurt and sell it to my neighbors. Like
Yeah.
that in itself is enough, right? For some
Hmm.
people at least. I think you have to be more afraid of losing audience members for not being political or transparent these
That's a
days.
great point.
Yeah.
What is that saying? It's on the tip of my tongue and I always get it wrong. And I have serious brain fog today, but it's like if you try to be everyone, no, everything to everyone, you'll be
Yeah, you'll be nothing to
That's
everyone.
the
I
nothing to
mean,
everyone.
yeah, I
Yes.
don't know if
Yeah.
that's the phrase, but it's definitely true. And I think that comes back to the content versus community thing. I think that maybe prior to 2016, a lot of folks may have seen content as a one-way form of communication that could
Mm,
go out to anyone, and it didn't necessarily need to be political.
yeah.
That era, for better or for worse, is over, and now content is a framework for community. Even if you're not running an explicit subscription-based community like I am with ACRE, you are still creating a community around your content, and community is a two-way
Yeah.
conversation. Your beliefs are inherently going to be part of it, and so
Yeah.
you should just own it.
Yeah, I mean that's what we talked about on our last podcast episode with you and Azara was just
Mhm.
about community and speaking to just like the tastemaker audience, it was built inherently on those values. Now, this is something that you and I were jamming about earlier off the record, but I think it's useful to bring up here it was this really interesting article I just read. I don't have the name of the author right now, but we will link it in the show notes. It's to a Substack. I believe their name is AO, if I'm remembering correctly, but it was their opinion piece and a hot take on marketing and content creation and social commerce and where it's going, which is kind of the point of this conversation of like, what are we doing right now and where is it going? And they were talking about how our age bracket, millennials, even elder Gen Zers are very values based and very driven that way. And we are the creators of the community. We are the ones who created the platforms to bring the people together. And it's interesting to see how the subsequent generations are then interacting with it and in the transactional nature of it because Gen Z, theoretically, according to this author, said Gen Z is the one who really went in and monetized it. And, the social commerce, video shopping, all of that stuff we're seeing now. Gen Alpha might be the group that they are relying on these parasocial relationships, and your friends are now basically your influencers. And so they're just going to buy, like, they don't care so much about the value stuff. They don't care so much about canceling and all of that, which this is conjecture, this is theory, right? But I
Mhm.
thought it was a really interesting insight. I appreciate people who have vision and are trying to think, 5, 10 years down the road. We don't know where it's going to go. But I think about that in the context of like, who are we as creators right now? Who is our audience? They're mainly millennials, but like we are needing to shift our content to this younger generation and how they're consuming. And so I'm just curious your thoughts about content strategy. Like, what is beginning to feel out of touch versus what do you think is something that is an evergreen principle from a content standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think that I think that while it seems, and again, conjecture, but it
Hmm.
seems like the younger generations are maybe not as concerned with ethical consumption, and I'm thinking about like Gen Alpha,
Yep.
specifically. I
Yep.
think that there's a certain sort of both existential and consumerist nihilism that they're
Yeah.
feeling, and like no
Yeah.
shade on them. The world is a hard place to live in right now, and you can
Yeah.
only handle so much, fire hose before you drown, right?
Sure.
However, with that said, I think that we have not only a responsibility, but an opportunity to model to them what ethical consumerism can and should look like. In our off the record conversation, me saying, I think that we shouldn't be selling to people, we should be teaching people. That's
Yeah.
that's my bias. And I love how you pushed back against that when we were off the record because it kind of made me realize I actually do sell to people and not just trying to get people to
Yeah.
join ACRE or buy my services or something. But when I talk to people online about the potential upcoming necessity of growing some of your own food and knowing how to preserve food and just living in community to support each other, I'm not telling people to buy things. I'm telling people to buy things that are produced more ethically. And I think
Hmm.
that we have that responsibility and that opportunity to model that for the younger generations. With that said, I don't think that most people, especially millennials
Yeah.
and the elder Gen Z folks, I think that they're much more receptive. And I want to preface this by saying we have to use this ethically. We have to use this evergreen principle ethically. I think they're much more interested in buying things that are wrapped in technical knowledge.
Hmm.
And so if you are quote unquote merely an influencer and what you are trying to do is just influence someone to buy something, whether it's for the sake of a brand deal or something, that builds revenue for you, but it does not build evergreen trust. Even if
Yeah.
what you're recommending is a good product or an ethically made product, there needs to be this relationship between what product should I get? And now, how should I use it? Why is it going to improve my life? And how can I increase my own sense of human agency and joy by using this particular product? And I think that most people in
Hmm.
the tastemaker community do that naturally.
Yeah.
But I think that food creators are kind of unique in that sense.
Yeah, because I think like this all lends to, the point being of this is like, well, how are you integrating this as like a growth strategy? How are you being smart about your business? Because we are first and foremost here to teach people how to run their own businesses. And you made a great point, earlier when we were talking about there's a difference between like corporate capitalism versus
Mhm.
commerce. And I think a lot of times we get into this mindset of like, I'm a business, so I have to run it like a huge corporation. It's like, no, you're a small business, and small businesses are beautiful for that reason because you can lead with your values and you can lead with like who you are. And I do think that's an evergreen inherent thing that I will die on a hill about, even in my old age. And so taking that concept that we're talking about here, how can creators be using like their trust and their authority with what they're doing, like as a growth strategy?
That's a great question. I think just to sort of like repeat what I said,
Yeah.
earlier, I think that defining for yourself how you show up politically, and how you show up ethically and how you show up in terms of what types of commerce you're aligning yourself with is going to be one of the most important things that food creators can do moving
Hmm.
forward. And I think that it doesn't hurt to lean into the optics of the local. And that's a phrase that I've
Hmm.
heard thrown around a lot recently, and I'm
Okay.
kind of obsessed with it right now, the optics of the local.
Yeah. Because
So
I'm asking, like, what does that look like? Like, give me a
yeah,
theoretical example of like a food creator doing that.
yeah, perfect. So without naming names, I'll say a very I think that she would be considered famous. A very
Yeah.
famous food creator who is a member of the tastemaker community moved to my town
Hmm.
last summer. I didn't know that she was here. There was no fanfare, unfortunately. And when I found out that she lived here, I was like totally fangirling out.
Yeah.
So she's fabulous and she's really, really well known for her food sustainability and food sovereignty content. We are going to be working together in June to do a pantry preparedness challenge
Hmm.
together. And so for her, part of the optics of the local is that she's not a farmer or a farmsteader, but I am.
Yeah.
And so she's coming to work with me, a local food grower, to pull food together, chickens, eggs, herbs from the garden, vegetables from the
Yeah.
garden, and use this optics of the local, anchored
Yeah.
in local regenerative agriculture, to create food-based content that then helps people not only understand what to buy, but also helps them understand how to be prepared through their own skill base. So it's
Hmm.
about skill growth. It's
Yeah.
about helping people where they are. It's not just about geographic locality, it's also about meeting people where they are. I think
Hmm.
that's an important part of the optics of the local. I follow a lot of food creators, as you might imagine, who produce some fantastic content that for me is very aspirational. I grow food, but you might be surprised at how bad I am at cooking it. I basically
Yeah.
make, variations on the same 10 things all the time. Both because that's like comforting to my autism, but also because I'm just not a very,
Yeah.
very great cook.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, looking at aspirational content, on the one hand, it makes me feel like, oh wow, maybe someday I'll be able to do that. But I know, and I know this isn't true just for me, it also feels out of touch to some people right now.
Yeah.
You know, I think because people are so focused, not in a fear-based way, but in a cold realism kind of way, on
Mm.
supply chain collapse, on how
Yes.
climate change is impacting food. People are
Cost of
really
living.
cost
Yeah.
of living. Oh my gosh, yes.
Hmm.
Even at the cheapest budget grocery stores, some things are through the roof. And so when you consider the optics of the local. You have to consider both literally how can I connect with local food producers and also what does local life look like for the people that I am making content for? How
Yeah.
can I help them and meet them literally where they are
Yeah.
and not make something that, they only have time to make on a Saturday and only if they spend $100, but what's something that someone can make for, $3 a serving in 30 minutes and that they can use some local ingredients from the farmer's market to get it.
Yeah, I think I use a local CSA. It's a full diet CSA,
Mhm.
which is, those are kind of rare because you go in and you get you can just go shop it. The way it's a family, they've owned this farm for generations and, they have their own cows, they have their own chickens, all these things. They get all their grains and their seeds and flowers. I mean, they bring everything in from the local economy and it's so interesting how you're even making recipes in your content when you cook directly from the local and from the land. I thought it was funny when you're like, well, I cook the same 10 things because I've noticed that when if I were to strictly, and I could subsist off of my CSA, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like my CSA gatherings, but
Mhm.
it's so and I think about that a lot of like even how your content is structured based on CPG grocery store living in corporate suburb America versus local regenerative CSA. And I think sometimes it can be like the black and white of like I have to do this or I need to do this and it can get overwhelming, but I've noticed that like I make the same things and I've felt this disconnect between when I'm like, oh, but I also need to supplement this with Costco order, or I'm gonna go here to get this thing. It is a different experience. And so I've thought a lot about that just from like my own content standpoint of how do you bring that together? Because I do think it can be overwhelming or intimidating to people who don't use regenerative or local, agriculture in their communities, but maybe they want to because they do care about the ethics and supporting, climate change, cost of living, all those different variables. Like, do you have any advice for people to even just like make a beginning start to add more regenerative tactics into like their recipe creation?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think if I were to start a food blog right now,
Hmm.
which again, so brave, I could never do,
Yeah.
but I did joke about this on Threads a few days ago. I said if I had a food blog, what would it be called? And I
Hmm.
think for me, it would be called Farm to Tism.
Yeah, that's a great name. I love that. You
Thank
should
you.
actually just did you get the URL at least? I hope you did.
I'm on it. I'm gonna do it
Okay,
right after
okay.
we get off of here, just in case. But the reason I mention that is because I think that to do something, to add a layer of regenerative nature to something, you have to look at what feels precious to you and hold on
Hmm.
to that one base thing, and then like think of the regenerative thing as something that you sprinkle on top of it.
Mm, I
Yeah,
like that.
exactly, exactly. Like, don't alter your entire base. What is the ethos of the blog that you're already making, and then
Yeah.
add one thing to it. And the number one like actionable strategy, I think, would be to just show up to your farmer's market and literally just tell any farmer what you want to do, and you're going to have an instant best friend for life. Can
That's cool.
confirm. If I'm at the farmer's market behind my booth and a food blogger comes up to me and is like, hey, my audience is really hungry, literally and figuratively,
Hmm.
for like 10 easy weeknight staples where the base is rice in every single one because that's
Mm,
cheap and it's accessible and it's easy to store long term. But I want to help them zhuzh things up. Could you help me put together like a custom basket of food that I can use to top rice? And this has to be no more than like $3 per serving or something. Immediately my wheels would start spinning because how cool is this project? Like if a
yeah.
food creator comes up and wants to use my food to create something like this for people, I'm going to go out of my way so far to make this happen for that food creator because wow, like just what an incredible project.
I think that's a very interesting point that is a nice bridge to another thought, a shower thought I've been having that I'm like, I need to talk about this on the pod and just generally. Um, is about that of like to bridge this into like the AI and just extraction, how,
Mm.
we began talking about the principle of extraction and where that lives. And I think we have spent a lot of time the last year or two talking about the extractive properties of AI from a digital standpoint of like it's scraping creators' recipes and content, and people are starting to turn to this machine to generate ideas for recipes. I think that is so cool to be able to go out into your local community and say, hey, instead of going to like AI or instead of going to this thing, I'm going to use the resources here. And it's this difference between being exploiting and this extractive property versus like abundance and giving back and regenerating, right? The regenerative opposite there. I think that is like an easy, beautiful way that you could do that. Locally, like, for people listening here, like go do that. Figure out how you can bring these regenerative practices into it. Because I do think that's something I want to talk more about is like the actual impacts of tech and AI, not only from taking our content and extracting it that way, but like what is it actually doing to the earth and why should we care,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Like, and
I
tell
could
me, like, why should I care about even as a creator if I'm listening?
yeah.
Maybe I don't care. Maybe I don't. Like, I personally, Abby, do. But like, why should somebody care about this? Putting ethical regenerative practices into their food content.
Yeah, as somebody who runs multiple small businesses solo, I
Hmm.
understand the magnetism of AI. It almost makes you
Yeah.
feel like you can clone yourself. And I know that anybody that's a content creator is always hungry to learn how to use AI more effectively. But in the food creator space, there's this layer of how can I circumvent the negative impact that AI is having
Yeah.
on me? And I feel for y'all. I've heard some real horror stories like 50% revenue loss
Yeah.
since
Or more.
2015 or
Hmm.
more. Absolutely. If you eat food, you should care about AI because AI data centers are gobbling up farmland and
Yeah.
ruining water in the
Hmm.
United States or really anywhere that they're put down. I live in an agricultural community. Vermont has an agricultural economy. The majority of our economy is based on agriculture, both animal and horticultural.
Hmm.
And recently there was a rumor going around our community that one of the local farm families was planning to sell some of their acreage for an AI data center. And thank goodness it turned out to not be true,
Yeah.
as far as we know so far.
Yeah.
But the swift response to that from the farming community, from the people who grow the food that food creators make recipes with, the response from the farming community was an overwhelming uproar of panic and also pushback, very effective pushback. If you eat food and you drink water, you have to care about AI. Um, I'm not saying I don't think there are any ethical uses of AI. I'm just saying I think that the way that we're using it right now as a general public is definitely harmful to us from an ecological impact.
Yeah.
And it's causing our energy prices to skyrocket and, et cetera. One thing that we're doing very purposefully in the ACRE community that I'm literally setting up today at the behest of a food creator who is a member
Yeah.
of the community is I'm adding a creator content channel to ACRE.
That's
Because
cool.
yeah, there has been a huge push on Thread specifically. There was a thread a couple of weeks ago that was like, can we have a super thread of every like Maha, food content creator so that we don't go to their sites and improve
Hmm.
their ad revenue, right?
Hmm.
And on the one hand, does it feel a little cruel? Yes, maybe. On the other hand, if I can help support the revenue, the ad revenue, and the traffic of creators that share my non-extractive regenerative values when it comes to
Yeah.
food and economics and agriculture. Am I going to go to them first? Abso-freaking-lutely. So
Yes.
we're adding this channel to Acre that's like, we want to pump up every single food creator that's a member of our community. We want to be constantly on their websites, helping them drive ad traffic and helping promote their delicious recipes because we need that. Community itself is regenerative. Content can be extractive,
Hmm.
but community is regenerative. And so the more that we can lean into community, both IRL and
Yeah.
ethical online communities, the
Mm-hmm.
more we can make that rising tide lift all ships.
I love that. And I think like that's the inherent tension I think that I know I feel and have talked to, with other people about is like this world in which we rely on our income from the internet and tech and all the data centers that hold all this conversation, everything we do and put out there, with the exception of like our in-person component
Hmm.
there. But like inherently creators, we rely on that. And so it's
Yeah.
like, how can we live? I think, to close this out, like, how can we live with that tension of knowing that we live in this world, in this system as it is? And so, in order to participate in it, you have to be complicit in certain things, but you can also, make those choices of like, well, where can I show up and where can I make a difference? You don't need to do it all and fix it all tomorrow or to, even in your lifetime at any point. But I guess what would be like your closing takeaway for people to learn to live with that tension and just uh, add a little bit of like that ethical sprinkling, like you said.
Yeah. I think not letting perfect be the enemy of good is something really important
Mm,
to remember. And I don't want to, I want to make it clear that I'm not just saying this to food content creators. I'm also saying this to anybody who might be listening who is like a liberal or a leftist that,
yeah.
uh, pushes perfection. There's no such thing as a perfect ally. We're all imperfect allies. We're all showing up, as imperfect humans and doing the best we can. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good. If someone shops at Walmart because it is what is available to them and what they can
Mm,
afford, don't shame them. Help
yeah.
them understand how to do the most ethical form of commerce and consumption that they can. Because late stage capitalism and commerce are not the same thing. Even in a
Mm,
leftist socialist utopia, which maybe would be my utopia, not necessarily your utopia,
yeah.
but commerce would still exist. We
Yeah.
still have to make money. We exist in this system. And because we live in the world of is and not the world of should, we need to be kind to each other and help
Mhm.
guide each other towards a better place, knowing that perfection just simply isn't possible within an imperfect system. We're all doing the best we can, so let's hold hands and do it together.
Mic drop. No notes. Oh, I love having conversations with you, Jack. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for
Since
having me.
we always end with a rapid fire wrap up here, tell me, what is a food trend you're secretly or not so secretly tired of? Just over it.
This
Or-
might shock you. I am so over farm to table. I'm so over farm to
I'm
table.
gonna fall off my chair from laughing. Wait, what?
Okay, I'm
Pause,
so
new episode. Just kidding. We need another 30 minutes.
yes. This farmer is over farm to table.
Please explain.
So most farm to table isn't really farm to table. It's like Cisco to table.
Uh-huh.
And it's just and also I'm over farm to table as a trend because I don't want it to be a trend. I want it to just be the
Uh,
things like the way that things are. Um, if something is farm to table, but like the table that you're at is in Vermont and the farm is in California, you've completely missed the point of farm to
you
table.
mean like farm to table is a marketing buzzword, not like the
Exactly.
literal definition of farm
Exactly.
to table.
Correct. Yes. Like
Hmm.
as a trend, as a buzzword, I'm over it. If the veneer of farm to table is there and the substance is not there, miss me with that. Miss me with that so hard.
That's so funny. I have a
Ugh.
funny story about this. So, context for my liberal upbringing. I was raised in Seattle. Like I'm assuming are from Vermont. Like we know these are very, no? Well, you live there now.
No,
Where are you originally from?
I was raised in a very, very conservative community in the Appalachian Mountains of North Georgia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay. Wow. Oh, okay.
totally
Podcast number
different.
podcast number 4, episode number 4 coming out. Um, no, okay, but like I feel like geographic locations. We talked about this even with Marta about San Antonio, about how they can be like coded to like liberal,
Totally.
Republican, conservative. Like we hear Vermont, we're like immediate maple syrup, liberal leftists. Okay. Bernie. He's there. We love
I
him.
mean,
And so I grew up in Seattle. Again, it's very like liberal coded. And so when that term came out, I was this was probably when was that? It was like the hipster movement. It began with the hipsters, which I feel like the hipster movement, it's slowly coming upon us again in the next
yes.
5 years. Different tangent we don't need to go on. But it was like 2012, 2013 maybe. And my friend and I were walking past this. I mean, we were in Portland. And so, of course, Portland is like the most hipstery farm to table, all the things. And it was farm to table this, farm to table that. And they were using it, I'm sure, in like the proper context. But I was the same thing. I was like, ugh. I just, I hate that term so much. Like, it's just like, it annoys me. And like, I don't like how it sounds. Like, it just feels so performative and just like,
Mhm.
ugh. But then I start going to this tangent and I'm like, you know what I do love though? I really love when people like, they have like their local community and they have like their herbs in the garden and like all the food is right there and they're putting it in their recipes. And my friend just looks at me and she's literally the smartest person I know. She looks at me, she's like, the biggest like dumbass look on her face of like, you literally just described the concept of farm to table. And so from then on and to this day, every time I see her, she goes, farm to table, hate the term, love the concept. Like I feel like I need we need to make shirts. Farm to table on the
I'm
front,
on it.
hate the term, love the concept on the back. So anyway, thank you for
Totally
going down
on it.
memory lane with me on that.
Love that.
Um, where can our audience get in touch with you?
Um, you'll find me chronically online on Threads, if you'd like to find me there. My website for learning design services for food creators and agriculture creators is workplaylxd.com. But where I would really love to see people visiting is ACRE, and the web address for that is acre.social. And actually, any tastemaker who wants to join ACRE, I'm gonna create a coupon code where tastemakers can get 20% off of annual plans on ACRE. And anybody who signs up for an annual plan, super fun thing. Surprise, don't think I told you this.
Mm.
Anybody who signs up for ACRE on an annual plan before the summer solstice, June 20th,
Ooh,
is going to be considered a founding member and eligible for a free farm stay here on our farm in Vermont.
that's
Yeah,
cool. There's
it was so
your
fun.
your content. There's the sprinkle, everybody. That is
Exactly.
so
If somebody
cool.
wants to do some regenerative goodness up here, that
Hmm.
this is your chance.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you for offering that to our people. Make
Absolutely. I
sure
love
you,
you guys.
yeah, make sure you go check that out. We have all the links in the show notes here, so you can grab that. And again, a quick plug for Tastemaker in San Antonio. Jack will be there. Yes.
Woo-hoo. Oh, of
You already
course I'm
have your
going to be
ticket.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we can talk more in person about this and be building that community, which is why we're here in the first place, community education and that experience. So great chatting, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Tastemaker Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review, giving us a rating, or sharing it with your creator friends.
And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
You can find more from us on our website, tastemakerconference.com, or even join us for an event where we learn and grow as a community of creatives.
The conversation doesn't stop here. Talk soon.